They thought they were throwing dirt on your name, but they were really planting a seed they'll never be able to uproot. My dear chosen ones, welcome back. You already know who you are. You're not loud, but your presence rearranges the air when you walk in. You don't chase attention. It finds you because your energy refuses to shrink. And lately, you've noticed it. The whispers, the fake smiles, the sudden coldness that wasn't there before. A jealous group thought they could break you, bury you, and rewrite your story. But here's the twist no one saw coming. They've never run across a person like you before, not even close. They underestimated what happens when someone unbreakable stays silent long enough to sharpen their peace into power. They mistook your calm for weakness, your stillness for surrender. But silence has always been your strategy, not your setback. You weren't retreating, you were reloading. They thought they were playing chess while you were sitting still, but they never realized you were the board, the player, and the next move all at once. And now, their little alliance built on gossip, envy, and insecurity is shaking apart under the weight of its own fakeness. You see, chosen ones, people fear what they can't figure out. When you move different, when your focus is internal, when you don't broadcast your every win, it confuses the ones who survive on validation. You became a mirror they didn't ask for. Your growth reflected everything they refused to face about themselves, and rather than level up, they chose the easy route, to hate, to gang up, to attack what they could never become. But let's be honest, they didn't just underestimate you, they misread the entire assignment. They thought targeting you would bring you down, not realizing that pressure doesn't destroy diamonds, it creates them. Every attempt they made to humiliate you, every rumor, every fake narrative, all it did was reveal who's real and who's rotten. They built a group chat to drag your name, but what they really did was build a monument to their own insecurity. And now the same mouths that spat venom are choking on their own bitterness, wondering why everything they touch is crumbling. They're learning the hard way that you can't break someone who was built from brokenness. You, chosen one, are the product of nights that would have ended most people. You learned to survive without applause, to rebuild without witnesses, to grow without permission. That's why they fear you, because they can't understand how you keep rising when the math says you should have folded. They see the glow, but not the grind. The peace, but not the pain that birthed it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how quiet it gets when truth walks into the room? That's the kind of silence you carry. It's unsettling because it exposes noise for what it is. Insecurity in disguise. You don't even have to say a word. Your evolution does the talking, and it speaks volumes. That's why they teamed up, because your authenticity was too loud for their comfort. But here's the beauty in this chaos. Their jealousy became your confirmation. Their attacks became your acceleration. They wanted to make you question your worth, but all they did was highlight your power. You didn't just survive their schemes, you thrived through them. And now, as they unravel one by one, pretending to heal while still infected by envy, you stand taller, calmer, and wiser. Because when the smoke clears, only the real ones remain. So grab your focus, chosen ones. This isn't just payback, this is poetic balance. The kind that doesn't need revenge, only results. You are living proof that authenticity always outlasts imitation. They tried to write your ending, but the pen was never in their hands. And now their downfall isn't your revenge. It's your reminder. No group built on jealousy can stand against one person built on purpose. And before we dive deeper, chosen ones, take a second to breathe this in. If you're still here, it's not by accident. You're here because you felt that pressure, that isolation, that strange tension of being targeted for simply being different. And deep down, you know this message is your reflection in real time. So if you're ready to flip the script on every jealous group that ever tried to dim you, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and drop the number 11 in the comments to claim your strength. Show your support with a super thanks if you've ever had to fight quietly while they plotted loudly. Because what's coming next will feel eerily familiar, the signs, the shifts, the proof that they've truly never run across someone like you before. Stay locked in. This is where the story turns. Let's begin. Number 1. They thought silence meant weakness, but you were the storm waiting in quiet. They thought your silence meant surrender, but you were just gathering power. They mistook your calm for fear, your pause for defeat. Little did they know, quiet storms cause the most damage. My dear chosen ones, listen closely. The reason they targeted you wasn't because you were weak. It's because they couldn't read you. You weren't loud enough to warn them, weren't desperate enough to prove yourself, and that terrified them. They're used to people who compete, who perform, who crumble when ignored. But you moved different. You didn't beg for validation. You didn't advertise your worth. And that silence, that graceful stillness, confused the insecure minds that only understand noise. They thought you were the soft spot in the armor, the easy one to manipulate, the quiet name on the list they could attack without consequence. But they didn't know you were built in solitude, in moments no one applauded, in nights when even your own reflection doubted you. You learned to survive in silence, not because you wanted to disappear, but because you were mastering the art of resilience. That kind of strength doesn't need to announce itself. It radiates through action, through consistency, through peace that can't be shaken. Chosen ones, remember this. Rare energy will always look fragile to the untrained eye. They saw a calm surface and assumed there was no depth beneath it. But the ocean never brags about its power. It just pulls everything in that underestimates it. You were that ocean, calm on top, unstoppable beneath. They confused your patience for passivity. They thought your kindness was compliance. But you weren't being quiet because you were scared. You were being quiet because you were focused. You were building something internal. Discipline, clarity, a backbone made of unbreakable experience. And when you finally moved, it wasn't out of emotion. It was out of precision. That's what shook them. You see, they've never met someone who doesn't need the crowd to clap before performing. They've never faced someone who doesn't flinch at isolation. They live off validation. But you evolved beyond it. You learned that peace is louder than defense, that progress is the best clapback, and that revenge disguised as self-improvement is undefeated. So when they tried to box you in, you didn't fight the box. You simply outgrew it. When they whispered, you didn't argue. You upgraded. And now they're watching your rise from the same seat they built for your downfall. That's the plot twist they never prepared for. Because when you're the real deal, you don't have to shout. The results speak fluent truth. Chosen ones, this is your reminder. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. You're not ignoring them, you're outpacing them. You're not broken, you're in blueprint mode. They thought they were reading your end, but they were only witnessing your beginning, and now they're realizing too late that the one they underestimated was the one designed to expose them all. So let them talk, let them circle, let them analyze your stillness, because when you finally move, they'll understand. You weren't frozen, you were focused. Number 2. They didn't envy what you have, they feared who you were evolving into. They didn't envy what you have. They panicked over who you're becoming. They mocked your growth because deep down they knew your evolution was their expiration date. My dear chosen ones, let's make something clear. Jealousy is rarely about possessions. It's about potential. They weren't watching your life because they wanted your things. They were watching because they could feel you outgrowing their control. You stopped fitting the version of you they were comfortable with, and that made them sweat. When you were quiet, unsure, and dimming your light to make them comfortable, they loved you. You were easy to manage, easy to predict. But the second you started evolving, mentally, emotionally, energetically, they panicked. Because now they couldn't measure up, couldn't manipulate, couldn't keep you small. They were never intimidated by what you owned. They were intimidated by what you carried. That kind of energy can't be seen with the eye. It's the type that can walk into a room and make fakeness feel naked. You started radiating peace instead of panic, self-worth instead of self-doubt. And that's when they turned on you, because the moment you stopped needing their approval, you became uncontrollable. Chosen ones, understand this. Your evolution exposes stagnation. Your growth is like a spotlight that shines directly on what others refuse to confront in themselves. You didn't insult them, you didn't attack them. Your progress alone became the insult. It reminded them of the goals they abandoned, the risks they were too scared to take, the potential they let rot because comfort felt safer than change. You became a walking reminder of what they could have been if they hadn't settled. That's why the attacks grew louder the more you healed. They tried to confuse you, gaslight you, drag you back into old patterns, not because you did anything wrong, but because your clarity threatened their chaos. They can't stand watching you detach from the drama that used to feed them, and the more you glow, the more their shadows panic. But here's the poetic part. Every insult, every rumor, every attempt to pull you down was proof that your transformation was working. They wouldn't fight so hard to stop something that wasn't powerful. You became the blueprint they couldn't follow, and the reality they couldn't deny. You used to be within their reach. Now you're orbiting beyond their influence. And they hate that. They hate that your new level no longer includes their names. Chosen ones, hear me. You didn't just grow, you outgrew them. You evolved into something they couldn't categorize, and it broke their illusion of control. That's why they grouped up. That's why they whispered. That's why they stared at your silence like it was a threat. Because it was. You were no longer the version of yourself that tolerated nonsense disguised as loyalty. You were no longer accessible to people who mistake proximity for power. So when they talk, let them. When they plot, let them. Their panic is the clearest confirmation that your evolution is working. Because when you start becoming the person they never thought you'd be, the one who sees through manipulation, who walks with calm authority, who doesn't flinch under pressure, they realize the truth too late. The real threat was never your success. The real threat was your growth. Number 3. You exposed what they hated to see. So they tried to shatter the mirror you became. You were the mirror they couldn't control. So they tried to shatter the reflection. They hated you not for what you did, but for what they saw when you stood too close. My dear chosen ones, this is the part they'll never admit. You didn't expose them by talking, you exposed them by existing. You didn't call them out, your very presence did. Every room you walked into shifted, not because you were loud, but because your authenticity rearranged the air. People who live behind masks can sense when truth walks in, and you, chosen one, were that truth. You didn't judge them, but you didn't join them either, and that alone was enough to make their insecurities crawl out of hiding. They had spent years polishing illusions, rehearsing personalities, curating their image like it was a performance. But when you appeared, raw, grounded, unapologetically real, their entire act started to fall apart. Because your energy didn't match pretense. You didn't play along with fake smiles and empty words. You didn't bow to the politics of approval. And that made you dangerous. Because nothing terrifies pretenders more than someone who refuses to pretend. Chosen ones, understand this. People don't fear you because you're better. They fear you because you're real. You became their unwanted reflection, the mirror that showed them everything they were trying to hide from. Their insecurities, their guilt, their jealousy, All of it came bubbling to the surface when you simply showed up as yourself. And rather than face that truth, they tried to destroy the source of it. That's why the gossip started. That's why they twisted your words. That's why they painted you as the villain, not because you were wrong, but because you were right in a way they couldn't handle. But here's what they'll never understand. Breaking the mirror doesn't change the reflection. They can distort your image all they want, but the truth always reappears. You were never attacking them. You were simply too honest to play along with their illusions. And that honesty, that quiet, unbothered authenticity, shook their entire system. You didn't make them uncomfortable because you were aggressive. You made them uncomfortable because you were free. And freedom is offensive to people who've built their identities around pretending. They mistook your peace for arrogance, your confidence for superiority, your focus for coldness. When in reality, you were just tired of fake. You were simply living in alignment with yourself. Chosen ones, remember, your presence is power. You don't have to speak to shake a room. You don't have to prove anything to reveal everything. Your authenticity has a frequency that exposes distortion wherever it hides. And those who built their comfort on lies will always see your truth as an attack. So let them talk. Let them spin their stories. While they break themselves trying to break you, you keep shining. Because mirrors don't fight back. They just reflect. And in the end, what they tried to destroy only showed the world exactly who they were all along. Number 4. They united in hate. Because they couldn't stand alone in truth. They formed a circle of hate because none of them could stand alone in truth. Weak minds need company. Strong ones need clarity. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about the ones who formed their little alliance. The jealous coalition, the self-proclaimed real ones, who found comfort not in truth, but in mutual hate. They didn't link up out of loyalty, they linked up out of fear. Because cowards always need backup when courage isn't part of their DNA. You were too much for any of them alone, so they did what fragile egos always do. They formed a pack. A pack built not on purpose, not on friendship, but on one shared mission, your downfall. Let's be honest, they didn't even understand why they hated you. Half of them joined the campaign without a reason, just vibes and rumors. That's how groupthink works. One loud mouth sets the tone, and the rest follow like echoes. They convinced themselves they were protecting their peace, when really they were protecting their insecurities. They wrapped gossip in fake wisdom, painted bitterness as boundaries, and called jealousy discernment. It was never about truth, it was about comfort, because your existence made them uncomfortable, and their comfort mattered more than their integrity. But here's the thing, chosen ones. When a group comes together out of hate, the only thing holding them in place is the very poison they spread. And poison doesn't sustain, it destroys. Watch long enough and you'll see it. The cracks forming in their unity, the tension behind those fake smiles, the side conversations turning into secret betrayals. Because when the mission fails, when you don't fall, when you rise, when your peace gets louder than their chaos, they start looking for someone new to blame. And the only people left are themselves. You, on the other hand, never needed a crowd. You were never fueled by numbers. You were powered by purpose. While they had to gather for strength, you learned to stand alone. While they rehearsed comebacks, you built character. And that's why they can't beat you, because you don't draw power from approval. You generate it from within. They operate in noise, you move in silence. They build from fear, you rise from focus. That's the difference. So let them keep their circle, the one spinning in gossip and validation. Because circles that revolve around hate always collapse inward. They will consume themselves trying to hold on to the lie that brought them together. You'll be somewhere miles ahead, thriving, untouchable and free, not because you fought harder, but because you never stooped low enough to join their game. Chosen ones, this is your reminder. True strength doesn't recruit. It radiates. Real ones don't need backup. They build back better. You didn't isolate yourself. You elevated yourself. And they called it loneliness because they've never experienced peace. So don't waste your breath trying to explain your evolution to those still addicted to drama. You were never meant to blend into their alliance. You were meant to outlast it. And now, as their alliance begins to fracture, remember this truth. When hate is the glue, destruction is the ending. You were the reason they united, but you'll also be the reason they collapse. Because they've never run across a person like you before, and now they never will again. Number 5. They aimed for you like a target. Not knowing you were the trap that would catch them. They thought you were an easy target, but you were the trap they built for themselves. They dug a hole for you, chosen one, but forgot you were the blueprint for survival. Now they're the ones sinking in the mess they made. My dear chosen ones, let's get this straight. They thought you were an easy mark. The quiet one, the one who wouldn't fight back. The one too composed to clap back, too self-controlled to expose them. That was their first mistake, confusing your restraint for weakness. What they never realized is that your calm wasn't cowardice, it was calculation. You were never prey. You were the test, and they walked straight into it, blindfolded by their own arrogance. See, insecure people can't stand when someone moves without needing applause. They need chaos to feel in control, so when they can't provoke you, it drives them insane. They tried to bait you with lies, lure you into defending yourself, hoping to catch you breaking character. But you never took the bait. You let silence speak. You let time reveal what words never could, and in doing so, you flipped the entire script. They thought they were building a case against you, but all they did was gather evidence against themselves. Every rumor, every manipulation, every secret alliance, all of it is backfiring in slow motion. Chosen ones, that's the power of stillness. When you don't react, their chaos has nowhere to land. It starts to eat them alive. You became their mirror, not because you fought them, but because your peace made their dysfunction louder. They wanted to see you crumble, but every hit they threw only made you stronger, sharper, and more self-aware. You didn't just survive their setup, you evolved through it. You became the reminder that calm doesn't mean harmless, it means controlled. They thought they were pulling strings, not realizing they were tangled in their own. That's the irony. Their obsession became their undoing. Every attempt to bury you became a shovel they used on themselves. And while they were plotting, you were building. While they were gossiping, you were growing. While they were forming alliances in the dark, you were forming discipline in silence. That's the trap. They thought they were watching your fall, when really you were watching their exposure. You see, chosen ones, there's something poetic about poetic justice. You didn't have to destroy them, they self-destructed trying to destroy you. Because energy doesn't lie. When you operate with integrity, it protects itself. When they move with envy, it eats them from the inside out. And now, the same people who once smirked behind fake concern are tripping over the consequences they set in motion. Their friendships are collapsing. Their opportunities are slipping. Their fake confidence is cracking. Not because you cursed them, but because they underestimated the power of their own intent. They called you soft, but softness was never your weakness. It was your camouflage. You blended in just long enough for them to expose their own strategy. And now you don't need revenge. You have results. You're walking away with growth, with clarity, with self-respect, the kind that can't be faked or fabricated. They wanted to hurt you. They ended up highlighting your resilience. They wanted to humiliate you. They ended up handing you the spotlight. So let them sit in confusion, chosen one. Let them wonder how you're still rising after everything they threw. Because here's the truth they'll never admit. You were never the target. You were the trigger. The moment they came for you, they activated their own downfall. And now, while they're tangled in the web they spun, you're out here walking free, unbothered, and unstoppable. Number 6. Your energy agitated their shadows, and they mistook their own reflection for an enemy. Your energy was the earthquake that shook their illusions apart. You didn't expose them with words, your existence did that. Some people crumble not because you attacked them, but because you reminded them they were never solid to begin with. My dear chosen ones, let's get one thing straight. You never had to lift a finger for them to feel threatened. You never called them out, never embarrassed them, never even mentioned their names. And yet they acted like you personally declared war. Why? Because your energy did what their fake confidence couldn't. It told the truth, without saying a word. You walked into rooms, and their insecurities started shaking like fragile glass. You smiled, and their masks began to crack. You weren't doing too much. You were simply being real in a space built on pretense. And authenticity is offensive to people who only know how to perform. You didn't cause their chaos. You revealed it. You didn't push their buttons. They were already broken, and your peace pressed play on their hidden discomfort. The moment you entered their world, everything they'd buried, the jealousy, the self-hate, the lies they'd told to feel important, started clawing its way to the surface. They weren't ready to see it, so they blamed you. They twisted your calm into arrogance, your confidence into ego, your clarity into manipulation. Because when you've lived in disguise long enough, truth looks like an attack. Chosen ones, understand this. People who depend on masks will always fear the one who doesn't need one. You didn't humiliate them. You just reminded them of everything they pretend to be. Your growth, your focus, your refusal to engage in petty games, it all highlighted what they've been avoiding within themselves. That's why they talk, stalk, imitate, and plot. It's not admiration, it's projection. You became the mirror they couldn't break, so they tried to shatter your image instead. And the wildest part? You didn't even know a war had started. You were just living, healing, growing, staying out of the nonsense. But insecure people see peace as provocation. They can't comprehend how someone can stay composed when they thrive on chaos. Your stability triggered their instability. Your evolution made their stagnation unbearable. So they came together like moths circling a flame, hating the light that exposes what they refuse to fix. Let that sink in, chosen ones. Their hate was never personal, even when it felt like it. It was psychological. You became a reminder that self-deception has an expiration date. Every time they saw you winning quietly, it whispered to their spirit, "You could have done better too, but you settled." That voice eats away at people who refuse to grow. So rather than confront it, they decided to attack the one who represented what they abandoned. But here's where the story flips. Their obsession is their own undoing. Every rumor they spread, every fake narrative they built, every ounce of energy they wasted hating you only amplified your presence and weakened theirs. They turned your name into their full-time focus, and now they're drained while you're rising. That's the poetic justice of truth. It doesn't argue, it reveals. So stand tall, chosen ones. You didn't ruin them, you revealed them. You didn't fight dirty, you just refused to dim, and the same light they tried to extinguish? It's the very fire exposing everything false around them. Keep glowing. Let them melt. Number 7, they played dirty, because integrity terrifies the inauthentic. They played dirty because integrity was your superpower, and that terrified them. They threw mud thinking it would stain you, but instead it only exposed how clean you really were. My dear chosen ones, this part hits different because you've lived it. You felt what it's like when people who couldn't beat your discipline tried to destroy your name instead. You didn't compete with them, you outclassed them, and that's exactly why they panicked. They realized early on that they couldn't match your focus, your emotional control, or the way you kept building when they were too busy scheming. So they did what insecure people always do when they run out of talent. They got dirty. They whispered lies, twisted narratives, and tried to build a storyline where you were the villain just so they could feel like heroes. They used silence as a weapon, pretending to be above drama while secretly feeding it. They planted seeds of doubt, hoping to make others question you. Because let's be honest, the insecure can't handle someone who doesn't need their validation. You became the mirror they couldn't crack, so they tried to smear it. But here's the irony. Every trick they used only confirmed what you already knew. They couldn't touch you without lowering themselves. Chosen ones understand this. When people can't compete with your authenticity, they'll attack your image. When they can't match your energy, they'll try to contaminate your reputation. That's not your problem. That's proof of your power. You didn't fight back with venom because you didn't need to. You had something far more dangerous: self-control. You let them expose themselves while you kept evolving. They threw dirt, but you were too rooted to be moved. You knew better than to wrestle in the mud because no matter who wins that fight, both walk away filthy. You walked away clean. That's strength most people will never understand. And now, the same hands that tried to throw shade are shaking. The same people who whispered your name are choking on their own lies. Their connections are crumbling. Their alliances breaking because you can't build anything solid on deceit. What they called strategy was just sabotage wearing perfume, and sabotage always smells like guilt in the end. The chosen ones never need to scream for justice. Time always does the talking. The truth has patience. Lies have expiration dates. And now those lies are expiring faster than their excuses. Their opportunities keep slipping. Their energy feels heavy. Their circles are shrinking. That's not bad luck. That's balance. That's the universe saying, you don't get to play dirty and still win clean. And look at you, still standing, still focused, still glowing with peace that doesn't require payback. Because when your power comes from character, no smear campaign can erase it. That's what truly unsettled them. You didn't just survive the mud, you turned it into bricks and built your next level. So remember this, chosen ones, integrity doesn't make you naive, it makes you unstoppable. You don't need to clap back when your progress makes the loudest noise in the room. Let them whisper, let them throw dirt. Because every handful they toss just digs their own hole deeper. And when the dust finally settles, everyone will see it. They played dirty, but you stayed legendary. Number 8. They tried to imitate your frequency, but you can't clone alignment. They tried to copy your fire and ended up getting burned by it. They wanted your light so badly they forgot the fire that made it would scorch them. My dear chosen ones, some envy doesn't come dressed as hate. It comes disguised as fascination. They didn't just want to outshine you. They wanted to be you. They wanted your rhythm, your resilience, your glow, without paying the price you paid to earn it. And that's where their downfall began. They thought your energy was a costume they could wear, not realizing it was a frequency they could never survive at. What you were dealing with wasn't ordinary jealousy. It was obsession, envy dressed up as admiration, curiosity that turned into imitation, until imitation turned into sabotage. They watched your peace, your power, your unshakable calm and thought, if I just copy their moves, I can get what they have. But what they didn't realize is that what fuels you isn't surface, it's substance, it's pain alchemized into purpose, it's wisdom earned in silence, not borrowed from a trend. Chosen ones, they tried to replicate your glow like it was a formula. Same words, same style, same moves. But the problem is, formulas don't produce essence. You can't manufacture authenticity. They studied your blueprint but ignored the foundation it stood on, the endurance, the heartbreak, the self-awareness, the rebuilding that nobody saw. You're not powerful because of what you do. You're powerful because of who you became when everything was breaking, and that's why they couldn't hold it. They copied your expression but couldn't carry your experience. They wanted your shine but skipped your struggle. They wanted your calm but not your climb. They didn't understand that what looks effortless now came from years of chaos that you turned into control. So when they tried to replicate your frequency, it backfired, because you can't fake energy. You can't mimic evolution. And here's the irony. Every attempt to drain your essence only exposed their emptiness. They're exhausted now, mentally and emotionally drained, because you can't siphon from someone who's self-sustaining. You recharge from growth, not attention. They tried to feed off your presence, but ended up choking on their own pretense. And now they're sitting in the same silence they once used to mock you for. Except this time, it's eating them alive. They're learning that the light they tried to steal doesn't exist outside of the person who forged it. You didn't get here by shortcuts or mimicry. You got here by facing what others ran from. Every scar became a lesson. Every betrayal became a filter. Every loss became leverage. And that's what built your core. One they'll never touch, no matter how closely they try to imitate your glow. So, chosen ones, wear that authenticity like armor. Your uniqueness isn't fragile. It's radioactive. That's why it can't be contained or copied. Let them keep trying to play with the energy they don't understand, because when imitation meets origin, the copy always collapses under the weight of what it faked. They wanted your shine, not realizing your light was a survival story disguised as success. And now they're discovering the painful truth. When you try to steal someone else's fire, you don't get their warmth, you get their burn. Number 9. They called you crazy for seeing the truth that threatened their illusions. They called you delusional because you saw beyond their illusion. They mocked what they couldn't comprehend, but when the truth finally arrived, it spoke in your voice. My dear chosen ones, you already know this chapter by heart. They laughed when you warned them. They rolled their eyes when you spoke your truth. They called you dramatic, paranoid, even unstable, all because your vision stretched further than their comfort zone. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. You weren't delusional, you were aware. You weren't lost in fantasy, you were decoding reality before anyone else could see it. They were trapped inside the illusion, and you were the glitch they couldn't ignore. You saw patterns they didn't, energies they denied, cracks forming in systems they swore were solid. You didn't need proof because your intuition was the proof. You felt what was coming before it happened. Shifts in people's behavior, storms behind fake smiles, collapses beneath the surface of calm. And when you tried to speak it, they dismissed you. They said you were overthinking. But, chosen ones, your mind isn't too much. It's just tuned to a higher frequency than mediocrity can comprehend. They mocked your insight because it exposed their blindness. It's easier for people to call you crazy than to admit they missed the obvious. Your clarity threatened their illusion of control. You weren't fitting into the small picture they built, and that terrified them. You saw through the masks, the manipulation, the noise. While they were busy chasing trends, approval, and validation, you were seeing the architecture of their lies, the way everything fake eventually collapses. You didn't need a crowd to believe you. You believed yourself, and that's what set you apart. You understood that truth doesn't need witnesses to be real, it just needs time. And now, look around. The very things they called you delusional for saying are playing out right in front of them. The friendships you warned them about? Falling apart. The plans you sensed would backfire. Exploding. The people who dismissed you? Now watching your old words turn into present-day reality. And here's the poetic part. They're coming back. not to apologize, but to understand how you knew. They call it luck. They say, you just got it right. No, you didn't guess, you saw. You didn't predict, you perceived. There's a difference between guessing the future and recognizing patterns no one else can handle. That's your power, chosen one. Perception beyond pretension. You were never meant to blend into their illusion. You were born to see through it. You don't live in a fantasy, they live in denial. And now, as truth floods their comfortable lies, they scramble to adjust, to rationalize, to save face. Meanwhile, you're already on your next move, unbothered, untouchable, and 10 steps ahead. Remember this: being misunderstood is the tax for being visionary. They can only call you crazy until the evidence catches up. And when it does, their laughter turns into silence, the kind that echoes with regret. So wear that delusional label like armor, chosen one. It was never an insult. It was confirmation that your mind operates where theirs can't reach. You were never wrong, just early. And time has a funny way of proving the real ones right. Number 10. You weren't meant to fit in. You were born to expose the madness everyone normalized. You weren't built to blend in. You were born to break the spell of ordinary madness. They called you rebellious for questioning the rules that were never meant to be followed. My dear chosen ones, listen closely, because this is the part of the story where everything starts to make sense. You've always felt different, haven't you? Not superior, just aware. You noticed the patterns others ignored, the fake smiles, the empty goals, the way people followed trends and called it truth. You saw it all and thought, this can't be normal. And you were right. The truth is, you were never built to fit into a system that feeds off imitation. You were built to expose it. From the very beginning, your presence disturbed the peace of the programmed. You questioned what others obeyed. You challenged what everyone else accepted without a second thought. And that's why the jealous group came for you. Not because you did something wrong, but because you made thinking look dangerous. You made authenticity contagious. Your refusal to shrink became a rebellion that threatened their illusion of control. These people weren't defending truth. They were protecting their comfort. They had mastered the art of pretending, smiling on cue, agreeing with lies, and calling it loyalty. But when you showed up, all that rehearsed normality started to crack. You didn't even need to call them out. Your energy alone started unplugging people from their mental cages. And nothing terrifies manipulators more than the one person who reminds others they can be free. Chosen ones, this world runs on invisible scripts. Most people don't even know they're reciting lines written by fear, insecurity, or inherited lies. But you tore the page. You stopped repeating and started rewriting. You started questioning why normal often feels like a cage built out of politeness and quiet misery. That's what made you dangerous to them. Because once someone sees through the illusion, it starts falling apart for everyone still living in it. They called you difficult, defiant, arrogant, all because you refused to play by rules that made no sense. They said you were too much, too intense, too unpredictable. But that's just what people say when they realize they can't control you. And control, my dear chosen ones, is the backbone of every false system. What they never understood is that you didn't come here to destroy for the sake of destruction. You came to reveal. You came to shine light into rooms where people had grown comfortable in the dark. Your truth exposed the hypocrisy that everyone else tiptoed around. You didn't need to shout. Your existence itself was confrontation enough. That jealous group, they were the gatekeepers of a broken order, the self-appointed referees of what's acceptable, what's allowed, what's right. But the moment you stopped following their playbook, the whole game started to collapse. They panicked because your freedom made their cages look obvious. And now their fake authority is crumbling in real time while you rise, untouched and undeniable. Chosen ones, remember this. Fitting in was never the goal. Awakening was. You weren't sent to blend into a corrupted script. You were meant to rewrite it. You are the glitch in their system, the question they can't silence, the proof that real can't be replicated. So keep standing tall in your difference. Keep asking the questions they're afraid to answer, because you are not just part of the story. You're the plot twist that changes everything. They've never run across someone like you before. And that's exactly why their version of normal is finally falling apart. Number 11. They declared war, but you fought back with calm, so powerful it broke them. They declared war, but you turned peace into a weapon they couldn't touch. They wanted a fight. You gave them silence, and nothing destroys chaos faster than calm that doesn't flinch. My dear chosen ones, let's make this clear. They didn't just gossip or hate. They declared war. Not the kind fought with fists, but with whispers, manipulation, and calculated silence meant to break your spirit. They came armed with jealousy, strategy, and groupthink, expecting you to swing back, to match their pettiness with rage. They were sure you'd crumble, react, defend yourself, or go down trying to prove your truth. But you didn't. You stood still, and that drove them insane. They couldn't understand that your power doesn't operate on their frequency. You're not wired for emotional chaos. You're built on self-mastery, composure, and restraint that they mistake for weakness. They came at you with noise, and you responded with quiet. They brought confusion, and you answered with clarity. They wanted war, but you were the battlefield, calm, vast, and untouchable. They expected you to sink to their level, but you never even stepped into their arena. That's when they started losing. Chosen ones, understand this. Peace in your hands is not passive. It's precision. It's the most dangerous form of control because it strips your enemy of power. When you refuse to play the game, they lose the scoreboard. When you stop explaining, you stop fueling the fire. You left them arguing with their own echo, fighting shadows you outgrew. Your refusal to retaliate was your declaration of dominance. Because anyone can swing back, but it takes real strength to rise above the fight and still come out victorious. They thought their chaos would corner you. They thought their collective noise would drown you out. But you don't need to shout when you are the calm in the storm. You turned their attempts into background noise, their hate into static. And while they spent sleepless nights plotting your fall, you were building, learning, expanding, becoming someone they couldn't even reach. That's why they're unraveling now. They burned so much energy trying to bring you down that they ran out of it for themselves. Peace, when owned by the right person, becomes a weapon of precision. It disarms without confrontation, exposes without effort, and destroys without ever lifting a hand. Your peace forced them to face their own noise. They started turning on each other, choking on the very energy they used to target you. You didn't fight back. You let their own negativity consume them. And while they collapsed in drama, you built empires out of composure. My dear chosen ones, never underestimate the power of not reacting. The loudest storms end in silence, and that silence is where your power lives. You didn't win because you fought harder. You won because you stayed centered when everything around you tried to pull you off balance. That's mastery. That's evolution. That's what it means to be the one they never saw coming. So when they ask, "Why didn't you fight back?" tell them this: I did. I just fought differently. Because peace in the hands of someone who knows their worth is not surrender. It's strategy. And that strategy is the reason their war fell apart while your name still stands. And as we bring this full circle, chosen ones, let this sink in. Everything they tried to use against you only became proof of how powerful you really are. They launched their little campaign thinking they could break you, but all they did was reveal who they truly were and who you were always destined to be. You didn't just survive the storm. You became the calm after it. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need validation. Your evolution became your payback. Their noise faded. Your silence won. That's the real victory. If this message hit home, show your energy. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop the number 77 in the comments if you know you're that rare one they never saw coming. And don't forget to share this with another chosen one who needs a reminder of their quiet strength. Stay focused, stay grounded, and remember, your peace will always speak louder than their chaos.